This is Lily from Atlas Lens Co. with Mark
Hey.
from
yeah.
MacGuffin Makers.
Hi.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, no worries.
This is super cool.
It's a very cool shop you have here. For
Thank
sure.
you. Thank you. Yeah, it's fun. We're a FX design and fabrication shop. We're in Glendale, California, and we make props, sets, installations for both movie, TV industries and beyond.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. That's
yeah.
I've seen some of your stuff. It's pretty wild. Go check
Thank
out
you.
their website, guys. All right. So one of my first questions I have for you today
Yeah.
is, what was your journey in creating this company, and
Sure.
what's your main aspirations like for the company?
Yeah. Oh, gosh. So I mean, essentially it was a windy road to to get to where I am now. I went to film school in Georgia, and then I moved out here with my cinematographer and roommate at the time, and we were full-time in commercial production, shorts, commercials, whatever we could do to keep money going. And along the way, we obviously both love high concept movies. That's what we grew up on, and you know, the blockbuster scene was something that meant a lot to us. So we often found ourselves making so much of our own props and sets and things that were elevating what we knew we could shoot. And that was kind of a draw for commercial clients as well. It's like, well, we made a little tiny shop in our backyard at the time. So it was like, well, we can make, X, Y, and Z work for this. So doing that, and then when the lockdown happened, we were just kind of stuck. There wasn't a lot of production happening. So I used the shop that was already in our garage and just started making things. I started making props and replicas and whatever I could find between 3D printing and casting and just DIY stuff. So I started doing that, and I started putting it on TikTok, and it started gaining traction and randomly going viral, as things on TikTok do. You can never understand why, but that happened. And from there, I basically started to get more inquiries about stuff, and it started to become more and more, whether it was one-off things for friends' shoots and commercial projects, or it was big stuff. And then a really big thing happened, and it was for Coachella back in 2022, and that's where I met my other business partners, and we made this giant set for Denzel Curry. And after that, we were like, well, this is really fun. We should expand this operation and do this as a thing. Like, we should actually make this real. So for the past between 2 to 3 years, we've been making crazy stuff for tons of different clients around the world. So it's been fun.
Oh, that's amazing. I mean, and what are some of the clients that you've worked with?
Yeah, it kind of scales. There's always the tough part, because there's some clients where the NDA is super strict and they don't even want to acknowledge it yet. But for just movie and television stuff. But I did. Back when I was still in the garage, I did all the earrings and belt buckles for Harrison Ford, and I can't believe I'm blanking on it. Helen Mirren for 1923. That was really fun. So did a bunch of those things, very period piece replicas and stuff like that. That was really cool. We've done a lot of advertising activation things, because a lot of the effects skill sets, they go hand in hand with what a lot of these companies use to, do marketing installs and stuff like that. So we made a lot of crazy, very special effects oriented marketing installations. We did a thing recently in collaboration with a shop called BT Pro for The Electric State, the new movie with Millie Bobby Brown and Chris Pratt that comes out next year.
Oh, heck
But
yeah.
that one's fun. But yeah, other than that, we've done work with Xbox brands, Halo, all their games, Starfield and stuff like that. But we've also done work with big artists like Beyonce and a little bit of everything in between. Random brands where you're they want something. That's okay. That's a crazy thing to ask for, but that sounds cool. We'll do that.
yeah, just being flexible.
Yeah.
We'll figure out how to make this work.
And that's exactly our mentality here, is that we haven't really declared a niche of something, because we really do just enjoy the process of making and building and fabricating and problem solving and everything that goes along with that, it feels very second nature to me, just like filmmaking, where it's like you're purely just trying to satisfy the end goal or the end result on screen, or put the money on camera.
Yeah.
And that whole process is very similar. And the maker community is very much hand in hand with the filmmaking community, which is awesome.
Yeah, I mean, I went to tour the Warner Brothers lots,
Yeah.
and it was just amazing, like how much they really have to set dress everything, because it was just like blank when we went there, and I was like, oh wow, they really put so much work into all that stuff, and it's wild. And you guys do that.
Yeah, it's crazy. Everything, art department, down to the smallest thing, they have to get credited with just how much they completely turn around a space or a look or a costume. I mean, there's so much art that goes into every frame, and it's amazing. I'm blessed to be a part of it. So
yeah, no, that's so cool.
Thanks.
And my other question was like, what's your main aspiration for this company, or like what's your main like goal that you'd like to get it to?
Absolutely. I mean, obviously, I'm a filmmaker at heart, and I think all of us here in the company are definitely filmmakers first, and I think that's why we have that approach to making things like we do, because our goals really are to make cool things for our own projects and for films that we want to do as a group, and kind of use this in the similar vein of how Lucas had ILM to make crazy stuff that didn't exist at the time for his films. It's like, well, we're trying to create an opportunity similar to that for our projects here, and that's the goal. So, yeah.
That's so cool. And then off of that, do you have any like dream product that you'd absolutely be like, I would love to make this?
Oh my gosh, yeah. I love sci-fi. It's all around the shop, and you can see bits of sci-fi a little bit everywhere. Sci-fi hand props to me are just the most fun and interesting thing to see, and I would love to do more of that. Obviously, when we met was at the American Film Convention, and we had that console that we made just as sort of a demo of what we could do, and that was so much fun to just make a cool techie sci-fi prop that has so much story and context and meaning built into it. That's the dream, is to do, little MacGuffins where it's like, okay, this thing has to drive the story in some direction. So it's like it has to be built with that in mind, and whether that's, even something like the prop of like a journal or a diary, if you can have the opportunity to fill that out, add story, add context, so that people can really sink their teeth into it and, get more and add more to the film, rather than just being like, okay, it's a sci-fi blaster or something like that. It can be more than that.
Yeah, that's really cool. When you mentioned that like sci-fi hand prop, the first thing that came to my mind was like Thanos' like golden hand.
The gauntlet. It's crazy. We were at the Prop Masters Guild Awards a couple months ago, and Weta Workshops, which is, famous in their own right for everything they've done, but they brought one of their pulse rifles from Alien Romulus, the new one, and that was by far the coolest prop I have ever been lucky enough to hold. It was so practical. It was so the mechanisms, every bit of electronics. It was just the most well thought out and engineered thing, and I was blown away. And I was like, this is a goal right here, to be able to make something that has that much thought for production built into it.
That sounds so cool. Oh my gosh, that's amazing.
It was awesome. Super cool.
So speaking of that, like, what's one of your favorite things that you guys have made in the shop already for a client?
That's a great question. I think on the personal side, that console that we made is very fun. That one's like a very, we got to all just kind of indulge ourselves with, buttons and lights and switches and crazy effects like that. But I think when we made the helmets for Beyonce, I think they used only one. We made two alternates, but there was one that they used, and it was a super fun build because it was inspired by Soriyama, like the very chrome helmet style, but then it just had this big, beautiful visor that was all attached to it. It was all magnetically put together, and it had to be. It was such a tight helmet that the only way to really get it on her was to build it in sections that would like magnet to each other, and you'd have to build the helmet on her, which was super cool. And then obviously, the first test fitting we did, the visor came, it was very close, and her eyelashes were really long to the point of touching the visor, so we had to go remake the visor, put a new one on, and account for the fact that Beyonce has beautiful eyelashes. So that's the kind of stuff that we, the kind of notes and things we work with a lot.
Oh wow, that's amazing. Like, did you work with Beyonce with that helmet like directly or through like a third party?
It was with her stylist team.
Gotcha.
And it was. So we didn't go to the fittings with her, but it was always like, all right, here's the helmet, and then they drive across town, go do a fitting with her, and then they come back to us, and then they're like, okay, so this was great, she loved this, and so it's a lot of that, which is pretty standard. It's it's very much a process of like, their time is super valuable, and it's very hard to get access to fittings and all the things you need, so we try to do as much as we can to be preemptive and then roll with the tight turnarounds.
Yeah, I mean you have to. You really do.
It's crazy.
Especially with that kind of stuff. Like,
yeah.
That's amazing. That's so cool.
Thank you.
And I wonder, like, where do you source your materials? Do you ever like go like thrift shopping or like vintage shopping to get like random things to like kind of piece together from like the side of the road or whatever?
Absolutely. I mean the speaking on like the term of like productions and like working with productions, obviously they need it as inexpensive as possible and they need it as fast as possible. So usually the first question you always ask is, okay, does a form of this exist somewhere? And sorry, we're also next to a rental house, so if you hear trucks, it's very loud. Studio. But that's the first question we always ask is, does a form of this exist somewhere that we can go get? And a lot of times, thrift shops or surplus stores. One that we love to work with and shout out is Apex Electronics. They're up in Sun Valley, but it's just a electronics, I don't want to say junkyard because it's very well maintained, but it's just a surplus area of old switches, bits, bobs. You can find the cockpit of an old plane, like random stuff, very, very random stuff, but it is awesome because you can find something where it's like, oh, this already is the form factor. Now we can add on to that. So it's like being in the San Fernando Valley is great because we're often, there's material sourcing all around us. It's very easy to just drive down the street and go to the foam store, which is great that is a thing, or casting supplies and things like that. Everything's very easy to source locally here, which we love. But we're always asking, okay, can we start with something that already exists and then use the tools around the shop to augment that or make that better, or, take it the extra inch above the ask. So
yeah, that's really cool. Master recycler over here.
It's fun. Yeah, it's nice to be able to use props again, which obviously is no secret in the film industry. Everything gets reused and rehoused and repurposed, and especially for sci-fi props, there's tons of examples of that.
Yeah,
it's fun.
I bet there's like prop houses everywhere where it's just like you're done with a shoot and it's like, what am I do with this?
Yeah, we had a piece of electronics on the last shoot we did for a Doritos spot, and it was a panel from Ghostbusters, and they're just like, well, they call them the Ghostbusters panels. We didn't really think about why, and then they're like, oh yeah, no, this was, they made this for Ghostbusters, but now it's just a rental prop. So that's a thing.
Yeah, it is. It's same with the foam store.
Yeah, exactly.
I've heard of that. Like,
Foam Mart.
I'm just going to pull up the Foam Mart real quick.
It's great. It's awesome.
And have you always been making things? And is there like a specific movie or TV show or even prop that like inspired you to go in this direction?
Absolutely. Yes, I've been a maker, a tinkerer of, just building with my hands has always been a passion of mine since I can remember. Started with Legos, then you go to making stuff in your garage and making a mess in your parents' basement and all that stuff. But Star Wars was the movie. Star Wars was the thing that I think for a lot of people, especially in this world, there's such a tactile feel to all of that, and such a tangible, like, you want to hold a lightsaber, you want to go stand next to R2, you want to interact with that environment. And I think that was the thing that drove me and a lot of other people to be like, I want to go live in that world, I want to recreate that world, I want to make that real. So that was the big first thing. And then of course, as you get older and you do more research and you find, okay, well, what were they using? What was the, obviously the famous thing is that the lightsaber is a flash handle from an old camera. And you think of things like that, then you get your own ideas of what you can add to that. And then somehow you wind up making a full-scale metal R2-D2 and it sits in your living room. So it happens.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
And was that like one of the first things you ended up making, or what was the first thing you ended up making?
Oh gosh. Yeah, I mean, it went hand in hand with filmmaking as a kid. So whenever I was making something, making a project, I wanted to make something fun to go along with it. So I can think of, as a kid making movies with a flip video camera, which I don't know if you guys remember the flip cameras. Flip camera. And I wanted to make a sci-fi shootout, and I turned an old hot glue gun into a sci-fi gun.
Oh, cool.
That's the first one I can remember, to be honest. But that was fun. Stuff like that, of course. A little boy in the garage, like, a sci-fi gun sounds cool. I'll make that.
Yeah, let's make a sci-fi gun.
Yeah.
Make a little film with your friends.
Exactly.
With a sci-fi gun. That's so cool. So I'm guessing you're a huge Star Wars Lego fan and everything.
I'm a nerd geek through and through. I love film. I love cinema, but I love Star Wars, and I love high concept blockbusters and the practical era of special effects and how that has evolved into what we have now.
Yeah, I know. It's amazing the practical effects that you guys and like everyone else in the industry can like make. And it's just, wow, like it's just amazing.
Thank you. It's fun, and it's hard. When we were at the American Film Convention, we were also trying to kind of demystify that for filmmakers, because a lot of people think practical effects, they also think very expensive, which it can be very expensive, but there's sort of, it gets thrown around like a buzzword a lot of like, oh, we're going to do it all practical. Well, okay, well, what does that actually mean? Like, does that mean you are, shooting on a 360 set? Does that mean you are working with practical props in hand and you're trying to minimize post work? Like, all of those things are part of that, but what does that actually mean for you and the story you're trying to tell? And for us, it's embracing the modern technology to say, okay, just because you can do it practically doesn't mean you always have to. You can go 80% practical, 20% digital. It's still going to read as a great practical effect, but that's what helps you, even with puppets and rod puppets, it's like, there's still visual effects in there. There's still visual effects in a lot of the practical things that everybody calls out, but demystifying that and kind of like establishing, no, this is a practical element to an otherwise, visual effects shot, which is great. It takes both of them to make it awesome. So.
Yeah, I'm sure, absolutely. I'm sure that's such a great way to go at it.
Yeah, it's fun. It's a good collaborative journey with both the filmmakers and the craftsmen and the people behind the scenes making it to say, okay, what do you really want to see on screen, or what is just prohibitive to do real, and there's always more than one way to figure it out. So
yeah, for sure. I bet. So let me check. We're taking a little drink break for a moment,
Not sponsored.
Not sponsored by Celsius.
No, but we're open to that.
Yeah. So generally, like, how long will it take for you to create a practical effect or proper fabrication from like start to finish, and how does that process go?
It scales a lot. It scales based on obviously what the effect is and when they need it. I think there's a good symbiotic relationship, especially with art department and art directors, to where they know if they have more. They always assume if they have more time, they're going to get a better product, which is typically true. But sometimes the need can be as short as a day to a week to a month to multiple months. And it all just depends on, like in that example with Beyonce, like there probably needs to be fittings to make sure this is going to work right, or maybe on some, higher budget examples, there's a camera test to make sure it reads right on camera.
Yeah.
So all those things kind of factor in. You kind of work your way backwards to say, okay, this is when you're shooting, or this is when you need it by. Here's what we can do in that amount of time, or here's what we can provide for the budget, or here's how we can make it work. So there's never a clean answer to it. It's always let's talk through the process, let's figure it out, let's collaborate, let's work together and figure out what we can do.
Yeah,
So.
yeah. That's wild. That's awesome.
Yeah.
It's, a lot of filmmaking is collaborative like that anyway. So
Very much.
that's
Yeah.
really cool. And like I saw that you have some miniatures, and then you have some like giant spaceships that you've made. Like, what's the process? Like, how different of a process is that for you guys?
It's really fun. I mean, we were talking off camera about how much we love miniatures and love that process of sort of that retro approach to miniatures. And the truth about it is that it has evolved recently. Technology like 3D printing and things like that have made those things more accessible, made them a little bit faster, which is great. But there's still a ton of artisan craftsman work that goes into making it look great and look real, especially at scale. So the ship that we were talking about, that was a donation box for an organization called Magic Wheelchair. They make costumes for kids in wheelchairs, and they make it part of an awesome, elaborate costume build for conventions or whatever,
Cool.
Halloween, all that fun stuff. They're great. But they wanted a money vacuum, and they wanted it in the form of a UFO that was going to basically abduct cash via vacuum.
Nice.
It was super cool. And that whole build was a brilliant collaboration between our electronics team, trying to figure out how to make a vacuum that will do that, but also be hidden and be sort of a sleight of hand effect. But then, of course, the miniature and the facade, the dressing around all that to hide that tech, was a 36-inch saucer miniature that we, built. And it's cool because, it's all the same processes. That one we tried to basically lean into the old-fashioned way of doing it, which was kit bashing, where you have a bunch of model kit parts and you have a bunch of incomplete kits and things like that, and you're taking little bits of things and you're putting them together to make something look interesting. And the best example is if you look at the any ship in Star Wars, but specifically like the Millennium Falcon, and you look at all the details, that's kit bashing. So they're taking parts from a tank model or parts from a engine model, and they're just putting them in places to make it look more built and made and used and textured in a way that blends in with that world. So that was a lot of fun. And then of course, modeling and printing small aliens or making small terrain and stuff like that. It's a predominantly used now in like architectural models and stuff like that. But obviously miniatures haven't escaped film just yet. The Romulus, or the shuttle, the Corbellion in Romulus, the new Alien movie, was a miniature, which is super cool. And they used it against an LED volume wall, and it was like the most beautiful combination of classic and modern effects.
Oh wow,
So
that's amazing. That's
Yeah.
so cool. I mean, I remember watching this one thing about how the first like Star Wars movie was like they made a bunch of like little miniatures somewhere. It was like a long time ago, but it's just like reminding me of that one time I watched that.
Yeah,
And it's wild, like what you guys and everyone else can like make for these films, and it's like it blows my mind.
yeah, it really is cool, and I'm glad that it's getting more of an appreciation. Because so much of that stuff was just turn and burn in that era of just like, okay, they need a model of a ship, they're gonna blow it up next week and done.
Yeah.
Which is great, cool, awesome. It's gonna be in the movie, but so much of it gets forgotten, and you don't think about the hours and so much time and effort that went into making those things, especially for effects in movies between the 70s to 90s and early 2000s that have just some incredible effects that someone was sitting there with tweezers putting details onto a model, and yeah, it's very different.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, have you ever worked with like stop motion animators or like studios like Leica who like build all the little props and everything for the movies?
We haven't worked with them personally, but I have a couple of close collaborators in film that have both worked at Leica and the other similar studios, and it is interesting how I wish that was around more often, because it is absolutely one of the last remaining examples of how detailed and how just the master craftsmanship that goes into making the armatures, those skins, and the patience and the commitment to doing that is beautiful. And every time I see anything from Leica or any stop motion studios, I'm like, you guys have to make a lot of stuff.
Yeah, that's a lot of props and wood and painting.
It's
amazing what they do.
I'd love to do it. I would love to do it. I would love that opportunity.
All right, yeah, Leica, listen.
Sounds awesome.
Yeah. So there's a lot of folks out there who are interested in like art department and like what you do. Like, what advice or like what would you tell people who are interested in doing this kind of thing? Like, what would you tell them?
That's a great question. I think based on the experience that I've had, I've never worked as a production designer on a film. I've either worked with a production designer or with an art director, and I've designed a couple of things. But I think the advice I would give is understanding the feasibility of process and things, so that as a department head or even someone in the department that can, be up to date on the technology that exists or the resources that you have in order to make certain things for these films. That would be my advice to just kind of stay up to date on that stuff, because a lot of people, I know this happens with 3D printing a lot, they're just like, oh, you can just go print it. And it's like, well, you can't. That's part of it. But a lot of times to make something look good that's been printed, there's a whole process of post-finishing and, as we call it, body shopping, that part to make sure you can't tell it's 3D printed. But there's a whole bunch of steps after that I think if more people in our department knew that or would be able to communicate that with the rest of their teams, you could start to see more of that happen faster, and probably for better budgets and things like that. So that's a long-winded answer, but I know that like just general understanding the feasibility of what their asks are, what goes into it. Understanding a little bit more of that is always helpful, because that makes conversations happen faster when you're asking for something on a tight turnaround, which is never, it's always just the nature of the beast, and we want to be able to collaborate and work as fast as possible.
Yeah,
so,
yeah. That's really helpful.
Yeah.
I feel like that's just good advice. Like, try to be as efficient as you can with
For
your
sure.
collaborators and team.
Yeah.
We have some questions coming in from the chat here.
All right.
Sweet.
Our first one is, what is an underrated movie with some of your favorite set design and props?
Oh my gosh, that's a great question.
Good question, chat.
Yes. Oh man, underrated movie. It's hard because I'm thinking of all the ones in my head, and I'm thinking, I don't know if they're underrated. I think everybody loves them a lot. But I'm trying to think of specifically effects that just blew me away, and you don't hear about them. Obviously, you hear about the big blockbuster films, but you don't necessarily hear about the stories that go on behind the scenes. And I know Terminator 2 was known a lot for its digital effects and what it did to pioneer a lot of that. But there are some crazy effects in that movie that were practical. The Los Angeles nuke effect scene that they did was crazy. They made buildings out of graham crackers and hit them with high compressed air to blow them apart.
What?
It's wild, and that stuff is super cool. I mean, all of that scene, I think it aged pretty well. It still holds up to me, and maybe that's just rose-tinted goggles, but I love it, and that's one of those scenes that I'm like, that needs more love. that specific part. The T-1000, all of that in the movie, that's great, and definitely has its place in VFX history, but there's some other stuff too that's also really cool.
Yeah, you guys know that?
Yeah, Stan Winston and his team killed it on that movie. So.
Yes, no, that sounds so fun. Blowing up graham crackers is
Yeah,
crazy.
there's always another example which I think got talked about in Light and Magic, but it was for Poltergeist, and Poltergeist had an effect where the house implodes and consumes itself at the very end of the movie. I'm so sorry if you haven't seen that. But hopefully you have, because the way they did that was a bunch of, they built a house basically out of very fragile materials like paper mache and stuff like that, and then they had it all wired to like piano strings, and they shot it up so the house was like looking up at the sky and the camera was looking down at it, attached to a massive vacuum and a forklift with all these wires, and then with one take, they just sucked it all together. And it is so cool. So that's also one of the effect shots where I'm like, that is an expensive take two that doesn't get enough love. But that was ILM in their prime of model shop. So yeah, those are underrated effects to me, and maybe not movies, but specific effects.
Mm-hmm. That's
question
wow.
here. How much of your work is practical problem solving versus creative work, and what's more satisfying to you?
That's a great question too. It can go both ways in terms of the projects that we do. A lot of times, if it's a bigger project or a bigger film or whatever it is, a lot of times the designs and everything are coming to you pretty fleshed out, and they're pretty thought out, and they're looking for execution, which is great, and that then takes it to the problem solving, hands-on. Okay, how do we make X, Y, and Z all work together? But I will say that the creative part of it is much more fun to me. I mean, I think the hands-on designing of, I talked about like kit bashing, like that stuff. That's my, that's so close to my heart, and I love that. And anything like that, I do enjoy a lot. But you do find, especially in the practical problem-solving element, you do find those little pockets of creativity where it's like, it's all a magic trick. So you're trying to be creative about the way you present a solution, or even just solve the problem. I'm trying to think of a good example, but there are instances where when you're so deep into the R&D and the engineering side of it, you find probably the most creative solution, the most creative effect. I guess an example, that console that we made, it's this big containment unit, and this whole chamber rises up out of it. Going around talking about what that could be, you're always stuck in the blue sky of, well, it could be anything. How do you narrow it down into what it actually needs to? I mean, we got a timeline. And the great R&D idea that came into the room was, well, a standing desk already does that. A standing desk goes up and down, and it has buttons on it. And you can already control that. Okay, great, awesome. You don't have to R&D a system that does that. You take that, you order a standing desk, you strip it down to just exactly what it needs to be, and then you build your form factor around that and build that into the design. So examples like that of really being creative about your approach to what does it need to be, what exists, right, like we talked about, and that's where the magic happens. That's where everybody's working together, and they're working really fast, and then you come up with something that no one's seen before, but it's really a combination of what everybody's seen before.
Yeah, no, for sure.
Yeah.
What's like your approach to problem solving, and if you're like on a tight like time frame to create something, how do you guys like work through that? If there's like a problem, or like, oh wow, this thing isn't working, like how do you approach that?
Yeah, also a great question. I mean, we are the title of the company, MacGuffin Makers, we really do embrace makers in every right. Everybody who's created something, that's you're a maker. So the first step in that process to us is to identify the processes or the makers in the room that might have the most proclivity to that thing. So we always tell ourselves, we're not an expert in any one of these things. We know a little bit about each of these things to be dangerous, but there are people who, yeah, exactly. There are people who just do specific kinds of like metal fabrication for things, or people who work in sewing that just make liners for helmets. Everybody, there's an expert in all of these things, and our company is sort of based around like bringing those people together and trusting those people to say, we're not going to tell you how this is, how it needs to be done. You're the expert here. We want to work together to find, what you recommend for that, and we'll collaborate to make all of these different people work together. And it changes so rapidly. But I think that's the first step, is identifying like, okay, what are the problems that actually need to be solved? But then, okay, are there people out there who have either solved these problems before or probably know more? And getting people in to do consultations and talk about things, and then bring them onto the projects to say, okay, that's an awesome idea. How can we work together to actually make it? So it's a long process that gets crunched into a very short amount of time.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah, it's great.
So at this workshop, like you mentioned, a lot of people who work here are filmmakers. Are they all filmmakers, or is it like a mix of filmmakers and like engineers? Or,
Yeah, it is, and it does change. As people, the way that the shops in special effects tend to work is a lot of people go from shop to shop depending on what jobs are happening. So we have a lot of people that will be at the shop for a couple weeks, couple months, and then they'll go work on another thing, then they'll come back. So it does evolve and it does circulate. As far as the 4 owners here, my best friend and also business partner, he's a cinematographer, and he's also a cinematographer with an incredible engineering brain, and he's probably staring at me somewhere. But he's such he has an engineering mind without formal engineering experience, but he, in a modern age, he'll figure it out. And having those kind of personalities, that has helped us a ton. We all have that same sort of desire to figure it out. But there are projects, of course, where you do need actual engineers, and you do need, things to be, permitted and up to code and all that stuff. And that, yes, we absolutely bring in like actual engineers and people that know specifically that thing. But we're always drawn to the, that film approach of saying, okay, what's going to get most of the effort on camera? What's the camera side of this thing? Even if it's not for camera, we're asking ourselves that question. Okay, what's the interface point of saying, that mentality is so far encompassing that's where we start. Filmmaker mindset first, then you go into the practical mindset of how do you put tools to material and make things.
Yeah, which leads to my next question. Like, what's the different process between making a set for camera versus making a set for like a musician?
Yeah,
that's a performance.
Yeah, it's pretty drastic. It's obviously for a set, during the strike and everything, we were doing a lot of activations for marketing, or like installations, very much sets that audience and general public is going to walk through. And with those, you have to be focused more on every angle that this thing can be seen from. It's all camera angle. It's a 360 set, and there's a higher focus on that, and also with durability, if it's going to be outdoors, and all these things, that there's a big focus on that. However, with doing things for film and for TV and commercials, it's a lot of what does it need to do on camera?
Yeah.
What does it actually need to do on camera? And we can do that. We some of the quicker things that come through the door are like people that will rent something from a prop house, like a water fountain that you would see in a park. And of course, they don't rent those to you as working water fountains. They rent those to you as just the form of the fountain.
Yeah.
But of course, in the shot, it needs to dispense water. So, of course, if they're only going to see that top part in the shot, then we're hooking up a fish pump, to the back of it, and that's coming out the back, and you're never going to see that. But now we've been able to tap into just the existing hardware there and make this thing function again, but on a trigger for camera and for art department to actually make that work. So that's a very specific example of like sometimes you just need that to do that bare effect. Like as long as it does that thing, then it's great. But obviously, if we had to make a water fountain for an installation or a pop-up in a mall, well, that's very different.
Yeah.
that's a lot more involved, and there's a lot of permits there.
I bet.
Yeah, and it's all obviously got to be housed in a way that doesn't look like you did that.
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
Right.
Like, oh, there's just a random fountain.
Yeah,
Nothing
just a
else.
random fountain.
Yeah, nothing else there.
Yeah, you never know.
So, speaking of like permits and like that business and like law aspect of everything, like how did you go about creating this business?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing that we came to with is we all 4 partners, we all had our own tools and stuff. We were all makers to begin with. So we all came together and said, okay, what does everybody have?
Yeah.
What do we all have? Okay, I've got I've got a belt sander, I've got a table saw, I've got a bunch of model supplies and model equipment. It's like, okay, let's bring it all together, let's see what we have. And that was kind of our way of doing a equity capital call for the company is like, what tools do we all have?
Yeah.
Awesome. We're all going to put it in one space, and then finding a space, because Los Angeles has a lot of warehouse space. Everything's very expensive, and we started with no money. We didn't have any, investment sense of like, we're just going to try this and figure it out. Looking back, it was very naive and very cavalier, but we made it work and we made it happen. We're very proud of that. But yeah, that was the practical side of starting it, and finding what everybody does in their own. We used to all be the hands-on makers. We still are, but now obviously as the business grows, you bring in more makers to help to work on things. So it's like we transition to project managers and creative directors, which is really fun. But of course, there's always things you want to get your hands on, and you want to be hands-on with the tools.
Yeah. So that's so cool. And so you guys do like a lot of contract work with various other makers.
We do.
Cool.
Yeah, we're always looking for new collaborators and new makers. So if anybody's listening that wants to get involved, absolutely, please reach out via our website. We are always, we always say something could pop up this afternoon, and we need people in the morning, which is crazy. And obviously there's no expectation there, but we always say that just to use it as an example of like how fast things tend to happen in this industry. And sometimes you need to assemble an army overnight of people to make a project happen for a very cool thing, and you want to do it, but it's always a matter of time and manpower, and if you can make it all work together.
Yeah, so engineers, studio artists,
prop makers, painters, anything. We make a lot of different stuff, and makers of all kinds. There's always a place. So.
Absolutely, it's just like a nice combination of engineering and art, and it's just so wild how that all works out. It's
so fun. I love what I do. I love being here, and I love being able to work on the stuff that we do. But there's never a dull moment. You have your favorite projects and stuff like that, but you also can't take for granted the fact that what you work on is cool. And I'm excited to come to the shop every day. It's always a good time. It's a playground here.
There's probably something new every day as well.
It's always new. It's always new. For better or worse, it's like, gosh, can't we get another one of these things? This was really fun. This was great. Nope, it's never the same thing twice.
Yeah, embrace it while you make the project.
Exactly.
So yeah. Oh my gosh, it just lost my mind. What was I going to ask? Okay, cool.
I have a question.
Yes.
Yeah.
What are some consistent challenges that you face working in this industry?
That is a great question. Let me think about that for a second. I think the timelines are always, that's universal, but that's to every business. And that's, timelines are always very tight. I think the biggest challenge that we face is how to adapt to new processes quickly, and how to embrace something we've never done before very fast. We always say that if a job can be, at least 60% of something we've done before, and that 40% is something new we have to learn, then that's okay. We can do that. We can figure that out. Obviously, if the scale's tipped the other way, it's probably not a good idea, especially if you're on a timeline. But that's not us just figuring it out. That's us bringing in the people who know it. So always trying to stay ahead of new things that come in, new technologies, new processes, everything's so rapidly evolving that we're trying to keep up. We're trying to figure out how to make that happen efficiently, both time, budget, all those things, and keep the network expanding. So.
Oh yeah, definitely all that. That's so cool.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Let me see.
Now I need a drink.
So, besides the Beyonce helmet and like working with her team, is there any other cool client stories that you think want to share?
Oh gosh. Yeah, I'm trying to think of some that we can't share, but some that we can.
Yeah.
There's, I have to think about that for a second because I'm trying to think of all the random things that happen where you're just like, oh, dang, that was really cool, or that was wild. There's working with, musicians in general is always fun because obviously you're seeing it all happen live. Live performance is really fun.
Yeah.
I think so. We did a piece for Tyler the Creator's festival. I think it was Camp Flognaw at Dodger Stadium. It was super fun, and he had this big set where it was like a junkyard, and there were all these different shops working on different elements. But he didn't shout us out by name, but he shouted out the people who made the set, which we had never heard before. That was super cool. That live stream, we have it saved because the set was massive. We had like 2 weeks to basically build a giant rolling junkyard that could go out on stage and come back. But it was a great shout out, and it was great to see someone on stage doing their thing take a moment and be like, they made all this happen. And I was like, that's super cool. That's crazy.
Shout out Tyler for shouting you
Yeah,
guys out.
thanks, Tyler. That was very cool of you. And I'm sure as soon as this live stream is over, I'm going to think of like, oh my God, there was that one thing.
Yeah, no worries. It's all good.
It happens. Yeah.
Yeah, I saw that one on your website as well, and I was like, they made a junkyard. What?
I will say the UFO that we did, that spaceship model. Richard Taylor, who started Weta FX, obviously Lord of the Rings, made that. He's very famous in his own right for all the crazy effects that he's done. But he was sitting at San Diego Comic-Con in a booth, and Richard Taylor walked by, and my girlfriend was at the booth, and she saw him like. He looked at it, he smiled, he went up to it, he took a picture, and then he walked away. And that was the greatest compliment I've ever given. Indirectly, I was just like, you know what? It was good enough for his camera roll. I am so down for that. That's awesome.
That's so cool. Congrats on that.
Thank
That's
you.
So
Yeah. It was really cool. Bummed I didn't get to meet him, but the story of that in general was just, that makes me happy.
Yeah. Maybe he's watching.
If you are, thank you.
Yeah, exactly. And earlier you mentioned you work a lot with Warner Brothers and like the studios and building all the sets for that kind of stuff. Like,
Yeah.
what's your experience working with the studios and building sets for them?
Yeah, it's crazy because there's a lot of moving parts there. There's so many different departments and different collaborators working on little things, and it's very uncommon for one shop or entity to do all of it. They're usually parceled out, and so-and-so's handling the walls, so-and-so's handling the things that are going on those walls. It's a lot of that. But what's cool is the Warner Brothers scenic shop is huge. If you've ever been on a tour over there, it's crazy how massive that shop is. And they have a lot of resources there, so when they're asking for stuff, especially to come onto the lot, it's like they needed something very specific. So, they come to us with a drawing, a rendering, and we make that as fast as we can and then get it over to the studio and it's on stage, and then you don't hear about it for months or years. And then you're just like, oh, cool, awesome, that thing finally got made.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah.
They made it.
Yeah.
So cool.
Which is fun, and I guess that's one of the, more parting things I would say is that, like, we do want to work more with indie filmmakers. We want to work more in that scene of people trying to get their features made or get their projects off the ground. It's like, if people come to us early and with time, then we can work with you. We can work to kind of help tailor the build to the budget that you have or that you're trying to raise. And it's like, if we're there in the beginning, then we can do a lot more. There's more time. There's more flexibility, and we want to be on your team to make these things happen. And we never want to be the company where it's like, hey, how much does this set cost? And we give you a number, and you're like, nah. Yeah. It's like, we totally understand, but if you come to us early, then we can talk about it. We can figure out what the specific needs are, and we have time to collaborate and figure that out, rather than, we want to keep it personal. We want to keep it very collaborative. So
yeah, especially that's going to be so helpful for a lot of indie filmmakers, just having that like budget and like negotiation rates and everything.
Yeah, it's hard because it's not a very publicly known cost breakdown of what is a custom prop cost, what is a custom set cost, what is all there's that. I didn't know that going into this, and then you have to kind of do it and figure out, these processes can get expensive, or this thing is probably a little easier, and we can do that, and that's why a lot of people do that. I mean, you're demystifying it for yourself, and it's great. But I would say, the clearing the air on, like, what does this realistically look like? What does this realistically cost, and what scale of budget does this work for? And that's all part of the learning game.
Yeah, I'm learning budgets just for myself right now, so I'm sure.
Yeah, I'm still learning too.
Yeah.
Everybody's in the process of learning. Oh, that's what that would cost.
Yeah, or oh wow, we'll see if we can afford this.
Yeah,
or
exactly.
Whatever.
Yeah,
or
and
does it work for the show or the movie or whatever you're trying to make?
Exactly.
Which is real cool.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely.
We're going to wrap up? All right.
Awesome.
Sounds great. So thanks for tuning into our Tuesday telecast. Again, we're at MacGuffin Makers with Mark, who's a maker.
I am a maker.
Yeah. Thanks for doing this.
Thank you so much. Yeah, no, this was a blast. It was
Heck
so much fun. Love collaborating with you guys. And
yeah, we did a collaboration, so
yeah,
stay on the lookout.
Coming soon.
Yeah.
Thank you guys.
Bye.
Bye.